Hello and welcome to Where You Lead, a podcast where we, a real-life mother and daughter duo, rewatch Gilmore Girls and discuss the misadventures of fictional mother and daughter duo Lorelai and Rory Gilmore. I am Tessa Dare, a writer and the author of the paranormal mystery series The Karanzan Chronicles and Beth's Daughter. And I have had one Seattle fog latte today, and I'm now technically on my first coffee, though a Seattle fog latte is black tea, so I don't know, coffee 1.5, I guess.
No. Tea is not coffee. But
caffeine 1.5.
It is caffeine. So we're both kind of on a different caffeine bet this day. But anyway, I'm Beth, Tessa's mom, and also a writer. Tess and I have been talking about politics, art, and culture pretty much since she could read. Sometimes these conversations have taken on a marathon quality. So last year, it occurred to us that we should move our discussions to the digital world, maybe even into a podcast. The Gilmores seemed like an obvious choice because the story resonates with us. I was a single mother of a teenage daughter attending a private school we could not afford, and many of the show's plot lines touch on topics that we like to discuss. So here we are. I am in St. Louis. Tess is in Seattle. No coffee for me today because I've been a little sick this week, but I do have a caffeinated, carbonated soda. Not diet, because that'll kill you, as Luke would say.
Is it a Dr. Pepper?
Yes.
And we now have
a St. Louis specialty. No, it's actually a southern specialty.
And we now have a Patreon. If you would like to support us on Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/whereyoulead. Every week, we will start off with a synopsis of the episode, along with the date it aired, before heading into our discussion.
Today, we are discussing Season 1, Episode 16, Star-Crossed Lovers and Other Strangers. It originally aired March 8th, 2001.
And for the brief episode overview, it's a very, springtime episode. Love is in the air. Luke's ex-girlfriend returns, and Rory and Dean get into a very big fight.
You know, I'm remembering when I took my notes last week that I don't think I wrote anything down about Luke's ex-girlfriend. Because she seems so unimportant to this particular plot. But anyway.
I don't know how long she sticks around here, but I do think she's a recurring character. I think she comes up a couple
I think
times.
she is. She becomes, but in this episode, I think she was only in one scene. She's referenced in a couple of other scenes. She might have been in two.
She's in two scenes, yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's not a lot of screen time. So we open with Miss Patty doing a voiceover. It's a long shot through the town. We pass through multiple different characters, including Rory and Lorelai, and at least one person that I don't think we've ever seen before.
It's another opening where they it's a one. There's no cut.
There's no cut. One shot.
Yeah, for about a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
And the fun thing about the Miss Patty scene is that she's telling a story that's a synopsis of a story about star-crossed lovers, and you think it's Romeo and Juliet. But then you get to the end and it's not. It's a description of the star-crossed lovers because they literally met under a quote-unquote starry sky.
Yes.
But these are the founders of the town.
Yeah, it's sort of the town mythology, and I know this probably won't mean very much to you, but it's possible that some of our listeners may have also seen Avatar: The Last Airbender. There's a town in Avatar called Omashu that has almost this exact same myth as its origin. It's like a town that exists between two supposed ancient cities, and the story it's very similar, except they both got lost in a cave and they found their way to each other through the cave, and then they founded Omashu. Anyway, it was just really funny to me that those two, I think Avatar was a little bit later than Gilmore Girls, but they were on at a pretty similar time, and this story is kind of the same. It's this small town myth for how their town got started, and it's a star-crossed star-crossed lovers story. So
Okay, so you're not talking about the movie, right?
no, not the James Cameron movie. What I'm talking about is a children's cartoon from Nickelodeon from the early 2000s that lasted for 3 seasons. The way that I have described it is it's very like Harry Potter, but like Buddhist. It was made by 2 American guys, but the style is pretty influenced by anime, and the world building is very Asian influenced. And the character of the Airbender is sort of like a magically powered Dalai Lama, because every time the airbender dies, they get reincarnated as a new person. Although, unlike the Dalai Lama, the airbender can be reincarnated as any gender. Anyway, so it's just one episode of this show. They go to the town of Omashu, and they hear this story that is very similar to the story in this show, and I just thought it was kind of funny that, like, as she was talking, I was like, this sounds exactly like the story of Omashu.
Well, do you want to tell the origin story really quick?
The story that Miss Patty is telling is the story of 2 star-crossed lovers from houses that didn't like each other who decided to meet up, and the stars guided them to each other, and then they founded the town of Stars Hollow. Luke later on openly states that he doesn't think this story is true. It doesn't honestly sound very true. It sounds like a myth that they made up at one point to make the town seem more interesting or something. And
they're not really star-crossed in the sense of how we think of that term, because star-crossed means that they never get together, but these 2 get together, right?
Yeah, I mean, star-crossed just means that they're ill-fated.
Ill-fated, but they're not. They found the town.
Yeah, they found the town, and they didn't die. I think star-crossed usually means that you die. But yeah, they did get together, and then at the end of her story, Miss Patty says, "Okay, now who wants to hear about the time I danced in a cage for Tito Puente? It was the summer of '66."
And all the kids raise their hands. It's so wonderful to see. Yeah.
I mean, it kind of seems like probably half of the point of going to a dance class at Miss Patty's is to listen to her stories.
Her stories. She's a great storyteller. Yeah. So the origin story is the back story for the Founders Firelight Festival, which is what they're setting up in that intro scene where the camera is following people crossing each other, and it never cuts. So it's one long shot. You've got Jackson and Lorelai and Rory and Lane and Sookie. You see pretty much the most important members of the cast. Then there's the founder sign, and then you cut to Miss Patty and her summary at the dance school. There's lots of other people in the town in the background, and then the Tito Puente's comment, which I thought was adorable. So then we get to Dean reading and waiting on Rory getting off the bus. So that's the intro scene. Yeah. And then with the second scene after the credits is Dean reading, and we did talk about, I think in our last podcast, that he's a reader.
He is, although the thrust of this scene is that he doesn't feel like he is as much of a reader as Rory, which is probably true. She's constantly reading. Yeah. And he is, for her sake, he is reading Anna Karenina. And I was honestly a little bit confused by this conversation, because he says that it's depressing, and okay, spoilers for a really old book, but Anna Karenina, it ends with the main character killing herself. She throws herself in front of a train. And so he tells Rory that he thinks it's depressing because she throws herself in front of a train, and then she tells him that he needs to give it another chance, which I'm just like, does she want him to read the whole book twice? Because if he got that far, that means he has read the whole book.
Yeah, why is he still even reading?
What is the second chance? Yeah, like what you want him to read it again? They have this whole back and forth where he's like, I think maybe it's just like going over my head, and she's like, no, Tolstoy wrote for the masses. Though she concedes that it's a bit difficult because it's Russian, and the Russian names are a bit difficult, and it's really long. But then she says like he needs to give it another chance, and I'm just like, he already read all of Anna Karenina for you. You want him to read it twice? What is this other chance that he needs to give it? He read the whole book.
Well, okay, but this is a discussion that you and I have had, because I loved Anna Karenina and you hated it.
I didn't hate it. I just didn't love it.
Well, and this is a story of ill-fated star-crossed lovers. Not really star-crossed, but kind of ill-fated, and so that's probably why they choose that book rather than another. But I loved Anna Karenina. I think you were right in your criticisms of it, that she is, a woman who's limited, and the writer is a man, and he makes this world for her that is not really something. Well, I don't know. There are women who've written stories like this, women writers.
That's not the thing. No, my
Okay.
issue with the story is that I felt like Tolstoy wrote a female character that was just like a feminine ideal for him and sort of fell in love with her,
Yeah.
and then he misunderstands her problem. Like, he positions the big problem, the big like theme of the book, the choice that she has to make is between her love for her child and her love for her lover, Vronsky. And she ends up choosing Vronsky and leaving her child behind with her husband, and that kind of destroys her because she's both like cast out by the world and because, you know, she's separated from her child and she can't really get him back because since she left her husband, society is kind of on his side and he's allowed to keep the kid. So Tolstoy positions this whole thing as making the choice between your love for your child and your love for your lover, and I was just like, that's not her problem. Her problem is that in neither one of these relationships does she get any autonomy. The thing that to me drives her to suicide is that even after she goes to be with Vronsky, she's not really ever allowed to be her own person. And I just feel like I'm not sure that Tolstoy got that was the problem. He seemed to just see it as this star-crossed lover story and having to choose between one love versus another. And my feeling was, no, it's that your entire society is designed in such a way that no woman is allowed to make a choice for herself. So that's...
This is written in 1877, and I just looked it up, and I did not remember that. I think what I liked about it was the prose. I really liked his writing. I liked the way and it's been 40 years since I read it, so don't ask me for details. But just the flow, the language. I did not like Anna that much. I remember that. But the story overall, actually, I can't even remember if I liked Vronsky or not. But everybody else.
I did not. I thought Vronsky was
probably I didn't either, and I also couldn't understand why she would choose this man over her child unless it was a way to get out from under, you know, the societal strictures of a woman, and that's the only thing she can be as a mother. So, but that's not what's going on here. She goes from the pot to the fire. Yeah. And it's not really that, but I did love the writing in it. I mean, I have never been one to read really long books, and that was a really long book, and I finished it. And you're right, asking him to reread this is incredibly stupid. It's just not stupid. It's just like, what?
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Like, it would make, I mean, I think it's like, it would make more sense if he was a couple chapters in and she was saying, and I feel like that's the feel that they're going for, and they're just sort of banking on most of the audience having not read it, because if you've read it, you know that what he's talking about happens at the end of the book, so he's read the whole thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the writers hadn't read it either, so there you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is a town that likes celebrating, getting back to the Gilmore Girls, and one of them says that to the other one, and I wrote it down. This is a town that likes celebrating, and I wrote, you think? Month-long celebration when they got off the septic tank system. Yeah. And for this Founders Day, they have rides, and maybe it was with the septic tank system. They had rides and a petting zoo to celebrate getting off the septic tank system.
I think some of that was her being sarcastic, but I'm not sure at which point it became sarcastic, because it does seem like at the beginning she's being honest, and then at some point it becomes a joke. I don't know when it becomes a joke. But yeah. I mean, they're having yet another festival. We saw them have that big combo Thanksgiving/Halloween, the fall festival, and then they had like a big winter festival that wasn't Christmas. It was about the other like old town story about the Revolutionary War. And now we're having a sort of Founders Day celebration.
And Rory loves this part of the town. She loves the celebrating. She loves these traditions, and yet she seems astounded that Dean wants to celebrate their 3-month dating anniversary. So thought that was kind of funny. But
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, my like little pet peeve about this is it's not an anniversary. Anniversary, the word includes the concept of a year. Anna from annos, meaning year.
You would think, yeah, uh-huh.
But yeah, Dean wants to do a big celebration with her for their 3-month quote unquote anniversary. He's got a whole thing planned, and she needs to get out of dinner with the grandparents in order for it to happen. And yeah, she is kind of thrown by this. I mean, this is her first boyfriend. That both means that she hasn't like experienced anything like a 3-month anniversary before, and that she's kind of just trusting Dean to sort of lead the way.
Well, it isn't a year anniversary. They are pretty young. 16, 17. We're still not sure about how old they are. But so for them, 3 months is a long time. How long do teenage relationships typically last? So 3 months may be a big deal, and it does turn out to be a big deal as we find out later on. But yeah,
I think what's really going on here is that Dean has this whole other thing planned.
Mm-hmm.
Like
yeah,
unbeknownst to us and Rory, he's planning to say "I love you" for the first time,
and he's done something amazing for her.
Yes.
That comes with that declaration of love. So anyway, but they get to the kitchen where Lorelai is, and she asked her mother to do this for her, to call the grandparents, and she might be able to talk them into it. What she doesn't really get, and this is what I was kind of astounded by, is that Rory, could get anything she wants from these grandparents. Lorelai, not so much. So I don't know why she asked Lorelai, but it does give us the opportunity to see that Lorelai does not cook. I don't think that's been obvious before. I mean, I know they eat out a lot. She orders pizza a lot. She eats salad out of a bag where she pours the dressing in.
Yeah.
But I don't think I realized before that she does not really cook, and she doesn't.
I mean, I think this is the most explicit they've ever been about it, but I'd kind of assumed before this that she doesn't cook because her parents don't cook and because they eat out so much. So where would she have learned to cook? Before we keep going, I did just want to mention that at the very end of the Dean and Rory scene, we see the troubadour again. Just briefly.
Oh yeah,
he's playing a song.
He pops up there.
So he's getting repeat viewings now that he's been sort of introduced. But anyway,
Costello lookalike.
Yeah. So the joke here is that Lorelai wants to make hamburger helper, and she's like so unfamiliar with cooking that she refers to the concept of making hamburger helper as real cooking, when I think most people would consider that's cheat cooking. All you have to do is
it's terrible,
boil
it's
pasta.
unhealthy, it's disgusting. I mean, it is such a joke in popular culture that almost every sitcom at some point mentions hamburger helper.
As kind of like low grade, easy to make food.
Hamburger. You make it with hamburger.
Yeah. And she jokes that she forgot the hamburger. Lorelai, when she's about to call the grandparents, she kind of imagines what their response is going to be and has this sarcastic, they're so happy. They're cabbage patching is one of the things that she said, which I believe is a dance move. I don't know what the dance move is, but I'm pretty sure it's a dance move.
I just assumed it was because Cabbage Patch dolls always are smiling.
I think cabbage patching is a dance move from that time period, and I don't know what the actual dance is. But yeah, to her surprise, when she does call the grandparents, Emily actually immediately agrees and is totally fine with it.
Which we should have been suspicious about, frankly.
Yes. Yeah. It's a little suspicious.
It's a little suspicious. Oh, and I just want to point out here, this is just a production thing, but as they are getting up from the kitchen table to walk, as she's walking around the table, I think with the phone, or else as they're getting ready to leave the room, I can't remember now, but a boom mic shows up in the scene as she walks by the table. I had to back it up and make sure that's what I was seeing, but it kind of drops down and then pulls back up really quickly, and they don't edit that out. It's like, did you not see it? Did you think nobody else would?
I mean, either they didn't see it or maybe they just didn't have the ability to reshoot the shot or
Or they
something.
thought they got it so perfectly that they weren't going to worry about it. I don't know,
Yeah.
but that's kind of, wow, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, then the next scene is a brief scene back at school where we're kind of reinforcing this whole love is in the air thing. Tristan has a new girl and he's making out with her against, I think, both Rory and Paris's lockers. He's like, he and this girl are fully blocking the lockers. I did have the thought that this girl kind of looks like a knockoff Rory.
She does.
And the girl is also really rude. She tells Paris that she has a long forehead and bangs would help her hide it. So I don't have a ton of sympathy for this girl. But also, the weird thing to me about this scene is I don't feel like this would have been allowed at most
I had
schools.
the same thing in my notes. Seriously, why would a private school allow this? They wouldn't. A public school wouldn't even allow it. And here's the thing. As I'm watching that scene, I was remembering what my public schools looked like, my junior high and high school. And there were always teachers standing at the door, waiting to, watching the hallways, And admittedly, I went to a huge school. There were a lot of students. They had to do that to make sure there wasn't fighting and the kids were walking on the right side of the hallway, because that's how many kids we had. If you didn't walk on the right side, there would be a traffic jam. So,
yeah.
But teachers were always standing at the door. And, on Abbott Elementary, the teachers stand at the door and welcome the kids in. So I do think that is a standard thing in schools. Probably it wasn't at your high school because it was so small. Did the teacher stand at the door and welcome you in?
No, because there really wasn't. It was my high school was in an old house, and there really was not room for
hallway.
that.
No hallways,
But there was definitely supervision, and if people were just standing in the middle of a busy area making out, and a teacher saw them, they would absolutely have gotten in trouble.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like I do think that my school probably had more opportunities for teens to make out, but that's because the grounds were kind of expansive. Like our classes all happened in one building, but there were also like dorm buildings and just like grounds that people were able to walk around in, and we weren't in class all day, unlike most public schools where you only get like a couple minutes in between classes. We would often have 35-minute breaks. So I do think the kids were probably technically able to like sneak off into the bushes and make out, but that doesn't mean that they would be able to make out like in the middle of the hallway where anyone could see them.
This is definitely, you have to suspend disbelief here. I just don't think that would happen at any
Absolutely
school. Not. A public one, for all the reasons that we talked about, that they have to maintain order in schools that have so many students. Private schools, because there's a certain behavioral decor that they expect you to abide by their rules.
And also I feel like for both, because the teachers are accountable to the parents, and if a student comes home and tells their parent that they saw people like making out against a locker, the parents are going to have to deal with that complaint,
Yeah
I do
remember seeing a couple passionately making out in a back stairwell once when I was in high school. And I was so taken aback by it. I mean, like, it was like a prelude to sex passionate. That's how bad, that's how intense it was. And I thought, oh my God. First of all, how and why would you do that in public? And secondly, why were there no teachers watching the back stairwells? And then I let it go. I forgot about it for years. But I just still, looking back on it, I was kind of appalled. So,
but it is also telling that it was in a back stairwell where there weren't teachers.
Nobody could see them. Yes,
exactly.
These two people were right in front of lockers in a busy hallway. It might not have been as busy as my high school, but there were students walking back and forth, commenting on it, whistling. That the whole thing. Where were the teachers? That's a question at Chilton all the time. Where are the teachers?
Yeah, the Chilton appears to have one teacher, and that is Max Medina. And I guess he didn't catch them because he was too busy making out with women in his classroom. So.
Oh man, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so then we cut to Lorelai, who is at the inn, and she also has to watch people make out. There's like a couple making out in a chair.
I just have my next note is, but then everybody at the end is making out. What the fuck? So I think, it's like I looked at the date again after I saw this scene. I actually paused it and pulled up IMDb, and it was March 8th or whatever. So it's not a Valentine's Day episode. But
it's
I guess
spring.
spring is in the air. Yeah, whatever.
Spring is in the air, love is in the air. Spring is the traditional pagan season of fertility. So everyone needs to make out, I guess. Including Michelle.
Who's on the phone to somebody.
And I feel like we're playing the pronoun game here, where it is not clear if he's talking to a man or a woman.
He never says.
Notice that? Okay.
Never says. And it's a very passionate conversation. I mean, yes. he says some endearments, some sweet
Mon
endearments.
Chéri.
But my next note is, it's just not Lorelai's day. No. Everybody else has somebody, and then she almost gets killed by a falling star. Literally. Yep. She's depressed by all these people who have girlfriends, boyfriends, are making out, and including her daughter, not making out, but has a boyfriend. And then she's walking across, and Sookie and Jackson are kind of in an intimate scene when she comes across them, and almost immediately she almost gets killed by a falling star that somebody has hung. Yes. And it breaks. It's so heavy, it breaks on the ground. Yeah. So if it had hit her, it would have killed her. And it's just like a foot off. So
yeah, and the guy says something like, "This never happens." And she's like, "Really?" Then she does enter Luke's diner, and she is kind of overjoyed to see him because she knows that he will be totally unaffected by this feeling of love in the air. He will be bitter and angry as always. And at first, he is.
He's very cryptic. He says just the right thing. And Lorelai smiles this shit-eating grin. And she says, "You are full of hate and loathing, and I love it."
Yes. Miss Patty and Taylor are hanging out in the diner, which I'm starting to develop my fan theory that Miss Patty and Taylor are best friends, because they are like always like in the one where Christopher was there. I think it's Patty that calls Taylor. Yeah. So I feel like they are the town gossips, and they are best friends. But they're hanging out at the table, and they're arguing over the story, and the story about the town. And Luke says something like, "The town of Stars Hollow probably got its name from the local dance hall prostitute," because he does not believe the story. And Lorelai makes, I don't remember exactly what she says, but she makes some kind of exclamation about how she's so tired of hearing about this story. And Miss Patty and Taylor both look super affronted, and then Luke jokes that she's bipolar to like explain away her outburst. And then Miss Patty's response is, "Really? But you're so young." So I don't think Miss Patty knows what bipolar means.
I that one completely threw me, because I thought, wait, was there ever a time when people thought bipolar illness only happened to older people?
I think she just doesn't know what it means.
It's adorable. It's an adorable thing to say, and it made me laugh. So I don't care.
I feel like it's like a knee-jerk reaction or something. She just heard a medical term and sort of assumes it's an older person thing or something.
Or she was being a smart ass. And because Miss Patty is very funny and very witty and very smart. So that, but it's possible. But anyway, so Lorelai's day has been pretty bad up to this point, and it just keeps getting worse because
Rachel shows
up.
Luke's ex-girlfriend Rachel, who is a photographer who travels the world,
and is beautiful.
Gorgeous. She's gorgeous. She has beautiful curly hair. She comes in, and she's got the light shining on her, and she looks almost kind glowing. Of angelic. And Luke is totally thrown for a loop and kind of stutters, and eventually says, "I thought you were in the Congo or Philadelphia or something." And she says, well, I was in the Middle East, which is sort of like both of those places. But yeah, he shows up, she shows up, and you can tell that Lorelai does not really know what to do, and kind of tries to smooth the conversation between the three of them before eventually just excusing herself and running out of there.
Well, and before she does that, Luke introduces her as Lorelai, who works at the inn. Yes. And she says, "I run it, actually." This is not the only time she's going to say this in the episode. So for at least twice, maybe 3 times, but at least twice, she has to explain to somebody that she doesn't just work there, she runs it.
Yeah.
But the whole love is in the air thing. She realizes that she misses Max. He hasn't called her. He did say he would. He would be in contact with her. And it's kind of unfair. Why did he get to decide after pursuing her so incessantly and her finally giving in, and then he calls it off and says, I'll call you? Why does he get to make that decision? Why does the guy get to decide if they're going to have a relationship or not? That really pisses me off.
Yeah,
so,
I also, for me, I feel like it's really hard for me not to, especially in this moment, just see Max as, like, an arbitrary obstacle for Luke and Lorelai. Because it feels like what's really happening is, if it weren't for Rachel, this episode would be pushing her closer to Luke, but then Rachel shows up, and because Lorelai kind of hasn't really accepted that she might have some feelings for Luke, she just assumes that, like, oh, this is just me feeling awkward, and what's actually happening is that I still have feelings for this other guy, which just feels a little bit out of nowhere to me, because, it felt like Max was just barely in the show, even when they were dating. There were multiple episodes when I don't
think it's Max. I mean, I think she focuses on Max because she's feeling lonely. Nobody else is alone.
Yeah.
She's the only one. Even now, Luke is not alone because he's got Rachel, who is back in the picture, whether or not she actually is. It looks like she is.
Yeah.
And I think that, she got through the Christopher episode, this is Lorelai, and realized that was not going to work.
Yeah.
Then she returns her focus to Luke, and then she's having a great conversation with him, and then walks his past.
And I think it does also, like, it's not even just that Rachel is his ex-girlfriend, it's that she's beautiful and she's really cool. Like, being a photographer and traveling the world is a really cool career, and you could almost imagine that being an alternate career for Lorelai. Maybe a Lorelai who didn't.
If she hadn't had a baby. But on the other hand, there's a reason why they didn't work out, and the reason is that Luke is not that kind of person. He stayed in town, we think, and built this little business, which is the same thing that Lorelai has done. She came to this town, she settled in, she built a life and a business and a family, and she is not this woman. She can kind of look at her as what if, but at the same time, she's not thinking clearly because Luke stayed, Rachel didn't.
Yep. So then we get a scene of Lorelai brushing Rory's hair and almost pulling out all of her hair, and then Rory gets her to stop and says, I just think it's a little early for Dean to see me completely bald. So she's helping Rory to get ready for her date with Dean, and then as she's helping her, I believe Lane shows up.
We should back up here and say that the reason for the 3-month anniversary on Dean's part is to take her out to a fancy restaurant.
Yes.
So they are going to, it is a dress up thing, although I'm kind of amazed when they get there at how small the table is. It's like a French bistro, tiny table where you would only drink coffee. So it's that small. But anyway, so she's getting ready for a really fancy dress-up dinner that she may never have done before, even with her mother. I mean, she does kind of dress up for dinner at the grandparents, but this is a special thing because it's a boy. Yeah. So Rory is brushing her hair, as you said, and is pulling. She's hurting her.
Yeah, she's hurting her. So Rory gets her to stop, and then Lane lets herself into another part of the house and calls.
And this is a great story. And actually, this story sets up a great visual later in the episode, but go ahead.
Lane shows up. Rory and Lane talk about their respective nights, and Lane is super impressed that it's 3 months. She says, that's like 1/64th of your life.
And she does that math really quickly, too.
Yes. And she wants Rory to make sure to tell her all about it later. And Rory's like, well, you should also tell me all about your thing. And Lane's like, I don't know why you would want to hear about that. I'm going out with this guy's entire family. And Rory asks her, is he another future doctor? And she says, a future chiropractor. I think Mom's losing confidence in my prospects.
Yeah, it's great. And she does say that the whole family is going with them, and we will see that later on. But it's hilarious. This ongoing thing with Lane getting fixed up with these medical professionals whose whole entire families accompany them on their dates. It's just
with these 16-year-old future medical professionals.
Future, yeah. Yeah, I thought he's older though. I mean, most of these guys she gets fixed up with are older.
I'm not sure, but they're never actually doctors. They're always future doctors because they're coming from
Korean doctors.
Exactly. They're coming from a family that has also like already determined the whole course of their life. But yeah, so then we get Lorelai showing up at dinner at the grandparents' house. And I feel like I think this almost every time they show up for dinner at the grandparents' house, but it is just crazy to me how formally Emily and Richard dress inside their own home. Mm-hmm. Like, no one ever takes off their shoes. I think that was really getting to me this episode. No one ever takes off their shoes. They're always dressed like they're not even at the office, but like at a fancy dinner party or something. Yeah. Always, 24/7.
I think it is a thing. It's a very old tradition, and they are old money family. Yeah. To dress for dinner. Mm-hmm. If you never watched that TV show on PBS.
Donna Reed.
No, well, that's it. Let's start with a D, though. Downton Abbey, where they dressed formally for dinner. It was just a thing, and this is kind of a holdover from that. And although, wow, it's 2000, it's 2001, but it's almost 100 years later, they're still doing this. But anyway.
I did watch, I have seen Gosford Park, and I do think there's a whole thing in Gosford Park where some of the maids are talking about how, like, half of what rich people do is, like, change into different outfits for different events. Yeah. Yeah,
and half their staff helps them get dressed. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's kept the maids employed. So, yeah. But she walks in, and again, it seems like a different entry to me, which I don't know if they're using a different set.
I think they're just shooting it a different way, but it did look different.
It could be. It seems like usually when they walk in, they walk right into the dining room. But then as I was watching, I thought, no. Maybe they don't, but the room looks lighter. It usually looks darker.
Yeah, we had to do the gag where she tries to hide her coffee cup in her purse, and then her mom immediately sees it and pulls it out.
Yeah, that was a great. She has to be caffeinated to deal with her parents. So, but anyway, so then she walks in, and we realize why Emily hadn't minded Rory not attending, because she's fixing her up. She's fixing up her daughter with Chase, whose name is almost as bad as Tristan.
Chase in the actuarial business. I feel like Chase would be a great name for a dog.
Yep, Tristan might too.
Yeah. But yeah, Chase in the actuarial business. And, you know, it's telling that you compare him to Tristan, because I think if there is a man in this show that I hate more than Tristan, it is this man. He is so creepy and so boring. Everything he says makes my skin crawl. The way that he looks at her makes my skin crawl.
By the way, I just got your dog joke. Sorry. Oh. Chase, yeah. Chase. It would be a good name for a dog. Very good. Dog, right? Actually, I was just watching a dog outside the window next door, and that's what made me think, Chase, yeah. Okay, sorry. But, you know, anyway. The great thing about this scene is that Lorelai is not alone in her distaste for this man or her horror that she is being set up. Her father is with her on this. Mm-hmm. He doesn't like the guy. He doesn't understand why he is invading their family dinner. Mm-hmm. It is not something Richard wants to deal with.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I feel like this also has at least a little bit of this kind of ongoing background story with Richard, where they're in a very similar business. I don't think Richard is literally an actuary, but actuaries work for insurance companies, and Richard is in the insurance business.
Yeah, and I was thinking at first, why doesn't he think he has more to talk to this guy about? So,
well, I think Richard is, because this was happening a little bit in the episode where he had a heart attack. Richard is starting to feel like younger men are replacing him in the workplace.
Oh, and actuarial science may be a more modern science. Because he says, no, I don't do that. I actually shake hands and make business contacts, and he's more on the sales end of it, and he manages the relationships. Yeah, and he's a relationship builder rather than an actuarial scientist, which is actually a very difficult field to break into. You have to be pretty smart.
Real actuaries have to do like a whole series of tests. It's like you have to do this like test every couple of years or something to like keep going in the business and to move up.
There's a lot of math in it, but it's also statistical, and there are degrees in it. And I think I could be wrong, but it seems like when Simon, your brother, was in high school, there was a friend of his who was wanted to become an actuarial scientist. That's not what. Anyway, actuary, and there were only 3 schools in the country at that point that had these programs. One of them is in St. Louis, so he was able to go and he got into it. But he was accepted into it. So it's not an easy field. So the guy is right, I guess, to be proud of himself, but he also feels like he should be able to connect with Richard, and Richard's not having it.
Yeah, Richard is not interested in this guy. I think it's at least partly because he feels like this guy represents, the movement in the business that's replacing him. But I do also feel like Richard is maybe also just like bored by this dude, because this dude
he's
sucks.
Boring.
Yeah, he's boring. He's creepy. The way that he talks to Lorelai is weird.
And Richard may be boring in some ways too, but he reads.
Yeah.
He's able to discuss literature with his granddaughter, and he's always reading the newspaper. He stays on top of things. You just don't get the sense that Chase is going to be somebody who can discuss Chesterton with him. That's the guy in the book, right, that they had, that he bought the first, was it Chesterton?
I don't think it was Chesterton, but I'm sure he has read Chesterton.
He probably has.
Yeah. I don't remember the name.
I thought it was, but anyway, it was the first edition. And
it was someone that I haven't read, and I've read Chesterton. That's
okay.
That's
all right.
But yeah, Emily is the only one who is actually interested in talking to Chase, and you can tell that it's more just like Emily is good at dinner parties and is good at kind of buttering people up, and she has decided to use this opportunity. It's honestly kind of a weird moment from Emily. Like I do totally believe that she would try to set Lorelai up. But it's kind of weird to me that she thinks that after all of her failures at controlling Lorelai, that she's going to get Lorelai to get with this guy, when this guy is like very clearly nothing that Lorelai wants. I don't know. I mean, maybe she just thinks
he's more successful than Christopher is. So sure. I think Emily actually thinks she's doing a very nice thing for her daughter. And when you were saying that she's good at these kind of dinner parties, she's good at bringing people together, at making connections for them. And I think that's what she feels like she's doing here. But Lorelai is talking nonstop because she's just astounded at what's going on here at her mother. And so she's talking nonstop. And Richard is flummoxed by Lorelai's nonstop talking. And he doesn't know what to do with Chase either. Neither one of them do. Richard is bored, but he's bored with the guy, he's bored with the actuarial business, and it doesn't get any better as the evening goes on.
Yeah, and okay, I only wrote down one of the specifics. Actually, I did write down a couple of the things that this guy said, because at one point Chase says, no, Lorelai, and I literally wrote, Jesus fucking Christ, I hate this man.
Yeah.
He sounds like he's talking to a child. No, Lorelai. Like, he sounds like he's a performer at a children's party or something. It's so weird.
He's got such a macho... He doesn't have a macho look, but he's got a macho attitude. So he says to her, now he's in somebody else's house, but he says to her, can I get you a drink? He's not the host. And she says, yeah, I'll have gin. And he says, and with it, and she says, nothing. Just gin. And then Richard says, make that 2. Or something. She says, me too. But the gall of this guy to think that it's okay to offer her a drink in somebody else's home.
Her own home. So
or in her own home, yeah.
The other thing that I wrote down that he said is he's talking about why he might want to live in Hartford, and he says Hartford has all the cosmopolitan big city benefits of New York without actually having to live in New York. And I lived in Connecticut for 4 years, and I've been to Hartford and New York. They are not the same.
No.
And Hartford is not a big city. It is a very small city.
It's a small city.
Maybe the smallest city that actually qualifies as a city in the continental United States.
I think a lot of cities on the East Coast in these smaller states are smaller, with the exception of New York. And I mean, St. Louis is huge. And, the further west you go, the cities get bigger. Because these other cities are on the East Coast are all older. They're older, so they're smaller. They just never got built out. The states are small. And so I wonder what the population in Hartford is. It'd be interesting to know.
Yeah,
but
I'm
it
not
is
sure,
very small.
It's very small. It's got like one
It's
of
got
the
the
absolute
airport.
smallest airports
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
country.
very small.
Like the only other airport that I've been to that was a similar size was this like teeny tiny airport in California that was like the fourth airport around Los Angeles or something. But
Is that the one
it's
in Anaheim or no, Orange County?
Orange County. I think it was in
Yeah,
Orange
yeah.
County. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a small one.
Teeny tiny, same size as the Hartford airport, basically. And the thing is, like, saying that Hartford has all the cosmopolitan big city benefits as New York is just straightforwardly not true. New York has things that are open 24/7. Hartford is one of those places that's so small that everything shuts down by 9 or 10.
Oh,
Like,
by 5 maybe even.
maybe even, yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's just such a weird thing for him to say. Like, it would make more sense if he said, like, Hartford would mean that I would live near New York City and be able to go there without actually having to live there. Like, that makes more sense.
He just wants to get into her pants. I mean, he's
Yeah.
taking one look at her. She's gorgeous. Her parents are wealthy. That's all he's seeing. He'll say anything. So
and I think it's also just like he just doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just a blowhard.
Yeah, he's a blowhard, that's for sure. Oh man, I mean, he would offer her a drink in her own home. So yeah, there you go. But anyway,
But yeah,
that's not going well. Lorelai's week is not getting any better. I just want to point out, this is the course of just a couple of days here, and it's just bad. It's one bad scene for her after another. So,
but she does manage to escape, and we can talk about the Rory and Dean stuff in a second, but I figure we can just get through this side of things. She kind of runs off to her room, and Richard comes to get her, and she basically begs him to let her run away, and she says that guy is so boring, and Richard kind of considers her for a second, and then calls back to Emily saying that Lorelai's not in here, allowing her to run away. And that's
Escape.
Honestly, I think it's maybe the kindest thing that Richard has done in the whole show so far.
It is. It is the best thing he's done as a father and as a human being. He knows when he lets her go that he's going to be stuck with Chase the rest of the night. So it's a very kind thing to do for his daughter. Also, it kind of shows that he's really beginning to understand her. She would be so bored with this guy, and he knows that. This guy is not good enough for her. Christopher may have been good enough. Yeah. But this guy, he's not good enough.
I mean, I feel like if Christopher could just like become a responsible person, that he and Lorelai probably would have been a pretty good match. They clearly have a ton in common, and Lorelai enjoys his company.
So then we see another dinner with Rory and Dean in this tiny table I mean it's probably not even 2 feet across, 2 feet in diameter, and they start talking about all the food they've had.
They ordered multiple kinds of pasta, but somehow they fit them all.
Three kinds of pasta because she couldn't decide.
Maybe they came out in tiny little bowls,
or maybe he didn't order anything and they just shared the 3 plates of pasta. I don't know, but first of all, that's a lot of pasta, and there was not enough room on that table for 3 plates of pasta.
No, there was not. And she brings a meatball home to Lorelai, which is some sort of joke from earlier that I
don't remember, but something to
it might have been a Lady and the Tramp reference.
Oh, that's right. She says, "Oh, it'll be so cute. You'll be sitting there, and you'll have the spaghetti string across the and then something about a meatball." I don't remember what she says about the meatball. It was supposed to be funny, but it didn't grab my attention until they brought it up again here. And she does get a meatball to go. Oddly, does not take any of the pasta home. So she takes the meatball home to her mother as a gift or a joke. Since Lorelai doesn't get dinner, she's going to need that meatball. But they ate the whole 3 plates of pasta? Really?
I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so that's their dinner, and then afterward, Dean has a surprise for Rory and brings her to a junkyard, where he shows her what appears to be a kind of rusted out hunk of junk, but he tells her that it's a car that he is going to build for her. They climb in the car together, and Rory is having a great time. She says that she's having a perfect moment, and then Dean says, "I love you," for the first time, and Rory totally freezes up, and they have a huge fight.
It freaks her out. It really does. Yeah. And you know what? After 3 months, it probably would have me too. What are you going to say to that? I mean, this is her first boyfriend, first guy she's ever dated. She's 16, I guess. We have to give in to that, even though she was 16 at the beginning and has had a birthday since then.
She's forever 16.
Oh, and the car is a mess. So
Yeah.
he's building this car for her out of junk pieces, and she's really impressed by that. I'm not. I'm like, what the hell? This doesn't even look like a car. It's not going to start. There's no place to sit. It's full of trash. I mean, you couldn't clean the back seat out, the trash out from the back seat before you show it to her. The door's barely open. I mean, he has to jump in on his side. So anyway, it's adorable, and yet it's kind of creepy, and it's even creepier when he tells her that he loves her.
Yeah.
That's just a really...
I have really mixed feelings about this scene. First of all, it becomes very clear when he says, I love you, that, like, actually this was not necessarily about their 3rd month anniversary. This whole thing was clearly him kind of like building up to this moment. And, you know, on the one hand, I think there are a lot of people who would find that really sweet and romantic. On the other hand, it is my personal philosophy that if you are going to say I love you to someone, it should be said with no strings attached. You should not be saying it with the expectation, that they're going to say it back. It should be an expression. Don't know. Yeah, you don't know. You don't know, and you can't control how someone else feels.
No, and not only that, but in this case, she may very well love him, but she's very young, and she's more immature than her chronological age would suggest. Although, when I look back at myself as a 16-year-old, I was pretty immature too. So 16 is a baby, and he has had a girlfriend before. We've talked about this before. He's dated somebody seriously. So he may be ready to say, I love you, but it's not even on her horizon. I mean, it's like, there's nothing there.
And because
she likes him. She likes him.
She likes him. She cares about him a lot. But, like, because he planned this whole night and he knew that he was going to say, I love you, he had time to get ready for that and to feel like he was ready for that. She didn't know that's where this was heading.
No. So it speaks about his own immaturity that he can't see that. So he says, I love you. He expects her to be all gaga, oh, I love you too. And she doesn't. And he is offended. And it's like, really?
He's really mad.
You think you're so mature that you can build a car and tell a girl you love her, but you can't accept that maybe she's not ready to say that. Doesn't mean that she doesn't feel it. Just that she doesn't even know what it means.
Yeah.
What does it even mean? Why would you say something just to make the other person feel better when you really aren't sure and you don't know what it means? What does it mean?
Yeah. And, like, I will say, like, I think it's totally realistic that he would have this reaction.
Yeah, probably.
He's a 16-year-old boy, and from his perspective, he feels like he's been rejected. And I have some sympathy for it, too. I mean, I was never in this position as a 16-year-old, but 16-year-olds are not mature. They don't know how to handle their emotions, and I certainly was not any more mature than this when I was 16. And, you know, when you feel rejected, it's hard not to lash out. But that being said, like I said, it is kind of, I am of the opinion that if you're in a new relationship and you're going to say I love you to the other person, you kind of need to give yourself a pep talk and make sure that you understand on a base level that when you say this, you are saying it to express your own feelings and not to elicit a specific reaction out of the other person. That
is exactly right. And in fact, you could even preface it by saying, I need to say this to you, but I don't expect you to say it back. And here it is. And that's the fairest way to be. And then if and when she's ready, she'll say it to you. She may never be ready. She may graduate from high school, go off to college, and never see you again. So it's really unfair of him to put her in this position with no warning and knowing how inexperienced and innocent she is. So it's not a difficult scene. It's a maddening scene.
It's a maddening scene. And honestly, I feel like this is one of the few times that Rory does a really good job of explaining exactly what she's feeling. Because she tells him, like, I didn't grow up with married parents, and to me, I have to think about the whole concept of love before I can decide if I can say it to you. You know, she's
very articulate about her feelings. Yeah, it's great.
And you can kind of tell that some of this is fresh for her because Christopher was just here. And she's very clear about how, she isn't sure how she feels about even saying it because she didn't have it modeled for her by her parents, and because her parents have never committed to each other. It's about commitment as much as it is about the feeling.
Yeah. And, this whole story really is a coming-of-age story for Rory. And in this moment, you really experience that coming-of-age trauma that she's going through because she has changed schools. Her father has come back into the picture. Her mother has dated her teacher. She started dating somebody. Her relationship with Lane is changing as a result of that. Her whole world has changed this year. And now this boy tells her he loves her. And what is she supposed to do with that?
It's a lot. And it's kind of unfair of him to demand that she say it back right in that moment. So then
before we go any further, there's a couple things that we missed in the scene with Chase that I think we should bring up here, because this one was really serious and we just talked about. So let's throw a little bit of humor in here.
I will freely admit that I did not take a lot of notes about Chase because he skeeved me out so much. So go ahead. Yeah.
Well, and our conversation about him was we were just feeding off of each other. So it was a great conversation. But I did write a few things down. I think he says this to Lorelai. He's trying to explain, what actuarial science is. He says, I could practically pinpoint the day you're going to die. I wrote that down because it made me laugh. And that is what an actuarial guy does. So I can't get that word out, actuary. That's what an actuary does, yeah. So Richard throughout this dinner is reading the newspaper at the dinner table. Have we ever seen him do that before? I mean, from beginning to end until Lorelai goes upstairs, he's reading the newspaper at the dinner table. And Emily doesn't say anything. Emily doesn't. So yeah.
He's usually got it before dinner, but you're right. I don't think he ever has it at the dinner table like he does in this scene. The contempt he has for this guy is just like right there.
It's that's a great visual to showcase that. So anyway, moving back to the where we are in the episode.
We get to the festival again, and we don't have to talk about this that much, but we get a little moment with Sookie and Jackson, and Jackson says, Sookie, you know what I'm thinking about right now? And she responds,
no. What do you think?
That time I roasted some red peppers over the stove burner and singed off my eyebrows.
It's great. That is the comic relief that we really needed.
Yep.
So then there's a visual comic relief too when they're outside again. I can't remember what's going on in the foreground because the only thing I wrote down was that behind Rory walks Lane with her date and 11 people in his family. I counted them. So 11 people in his family are on this very Korean date with the future chiropractor.
It's like a small, somber parade.
And they just walk past her, and Lane kind of looks over to her real quick and looks back, and that is probably the best visual in the whole episode.
Then we get Rachel's other scene, Rachel's final scene in the episode. She's taking pictures of people at the festival, and Luke comes up and asks her if the pictures are going well, and she says yes, the firelight really changes people, and then he makes a joke about how it's either that or it's like the Founder's Punch, which is full of alcohol.
Yeah.
I did have a note. There's like when we first see her taking pictures, I mean, the show is 20 years old. The camera that she's using thus is 20 years old, and she's kind of continuously moving while she's taking some of these pictures. Do you know if that would have worked with a camera like that? Would those pictures have come out at all?
Yeah, 2001, it could have been a digital camera. It's hard to say. There were digital SLRs back then, and it could have been a film camera, and she's just planning. Maybe she's got a roll of 36 in it, and she's just planning to. But yeah, you had to be more careful when you were shooting with film than when you were shooting with on a digital camera. But digital cameras were around. I think a friend of ours who was a photographer had one. He loved it. He took a lot of pictures with it and thought the digital pictures were just as good as film, and he made the switch right away. So who knows what she's doing? But I think it's something that you see a lot in movies even in the film era, I think you would see camera photographers, clicking away and moving their bodies in different positions
Yeah, I
and
guess
clicking away. It's a visual.
it looks to me like she's not pausing even as she's taking the picture. So it just feels
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of these pictures are going to be blurry and unfocused, you know?
Well, yeah.
But maybe she's just not a very good photographer.
Well, and is it dark? I can't remember. Is it nighttime?
It is nighttime, yeah.
So she's probably using, if there's no flash, she's using,
Yeah.
highly sensitive film, 400
Yeah.
ASA or whatever, and that is going to blur.
Yeah.
So it's a good point, but we're nitpicking anyway.
But yeah, Rachel and Luke sit on a bench for a little bit, and then, and she asks him about Lorelai.
And then he tells her about the punch, and she goes off to get some punch.
Yeah,
Is that right?
and she does ask him about Lorelai. She says something like, "If we're being blunt, then like tell me the truth about what's up with Lorelai." And
he says, "I don't know."
Yeah, he basically says, "I don't know. Sometimes it feels like maybe something, but I don't really know."
Yeah.
And so then she leaves, and Lorelai comes and replaces her.
And it's such a sweet scene because he basically gives Luke permission to resume his relationship with Rachel and kind of encourages it and asks him really nice questions, even though her heart is breaking because all these people around her have been making out and on dates, and she can't even get Max on the phone. He hasn't called her, but she gives Luke permission to do what he needs to do to make himself happy.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like there was this sort of air of, like, it felt like she also was just sort of assuming that he would want to get back together with Rachel, which I understand why she's assuming that, but to be honest, I wouldn't assume that because he was pretty hurt by Rachel leaving before.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that his feelings for her have disappeared, but he just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who would automatically get back together with someone that he felt had on some level betrayed him.
And he may not, but Lorelai can't come at this from that angle because if she comes across as somebody who's trying to get him to remember how much this woman hurt him and to feel bad about it, that's not going to put her in a very good light. And actually, it doesn't even matter. It's not in her personality. She's just not somebody who's ever going to do that. That's not who Lorelai is. She wants Luke to be happy.
Yes.
I mean, she wants to be happy herself as well, but she would never put her happiness above at his expense. Yeah. So she wants him to be happy. She can see that this is something he needs to think about and consider, and she gives him permission to do that. But she asks him questions and gets him to admit how that he would be open to it. But of course, we're sitting here watching this and thinking, she's just going to break your heart again. This woman is just she's going to get back into your life. She's going to leave again because that's who she is. And it's actually a reversal of typical male and female roles.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's in TV and films, it's the man who is in that role. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of interested in Rachel as a character. But yeah, like I'm thinking she's gonna leave him again, not just because of who she is, but also because her coming here in the first place was kind of a whim.
She's between assignments. It's like, really, you're between assignments and you come back for the first time in 10 years to re-break this man's heart. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like she has come back to get back together with him and settle down and get married. It feels like she wants some entertainment while she's taken a short break from her real life of globetrotting.
And to give her credit, it could be that the globetrotting life is lonely.
Yeah. I don't mean this to be judgmental. I think her life sounds cool.
I agree. I'm not being judgmental either. I think we get that from her, that she's exploring this because maybe she is lonely or maybe they're having relationships, but nothing's really, really caught. And this town has a feel to it. It's kind of home. It's got a home feel to it. It makes her comfortable. It's soothing. And so maybe, and I can't remember what happens in the next several episodes, but maybe something has happened that she needs to relax and have something stable maybe for a while. And that's what she's seeing. But then if she's got this great career, she's probably going to want to, at some point, go back to it.
Yeah. And, I can't really blame her for wanting to go back to Luke because Luke is great. Mm-hmm. But I will say that if what she wants is essentially just like an occasional fling buddy, Luke is the wrong person to do that with.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he is the opposite of that kind of... She could do that with Christopher. Yeah.
Yeah, she and Christopher would be great together.
Yeah. But yeah, so then Lorelai goes home and attempts to call Max, and we hear his answering machine pick up, but she does not leave a message because she is interrupted by Rory, who has come home crying and tells her that she and Dean have broken up.
So we don't know what happened, if anything else happened when they leave the junkyard. She's still sitting in the car and he leaves, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit odd because they didn't say in that scene that they were breaking up, though it was clearly a very big fight, and he did kind of walk away from her.
And so did she run after him? We don't know. We don't know if
Yeah, we're not
anything
sure.
else happened, or she is assuming that they've broken up because of the fight. Because, again, she is very inexperienced. She doesn't understand that this is a fight and not the end of things, or whether it is.
And he does say some stuff that kind of implies that he does want to break up.
This is what he wants. And
Yeah.
if she doesn't want it, then maybe they shouldn't be together. Something like that. I can't remember exactly what he says.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And the unfortunate implication of it is kind of like, either you say I love you back, or I'm going to break up with you.
Yeah. And she doesn't do it, so I guess she assumes that they have broken up.
Yeah.
We don't know how she gets home. We don't know where the junkyard is.
Yeah.
You know, it's that there's a lot of untold story here, so.
Yeah, and I believe the next episode is called The Breakup Part 2, so I'm assuming that we're going to kind of continue this storyline moving forward, but that's all we get for today.
That's all we get for today, and I don't really have a summary because I don't really know what to think about this episode. I think it is a coming of age thing for Rory. It's kind of a step along the path that she's on. Yeah. And it's an important one in lots of ways. It's also an important one for Lorelai, who also is coming of age, kind of in a different way during this first season, where she's realizing that her child is growing up, and she does need to make some kind of a life for herself going forward. Yeah. Is that going to be Max? Is that going to be Christopher? Is that going to be Luke? Is it going to be none of them? Is she just going to be a single woman the rest of her life? That she just has questions too. There's a lot that's unanswered and open-ended, and as opposed to what Rory's going through, because she knows what she wants. She's got her future mapped out. Of course, we know that a lot of what she wants to have happen doesn't happen in the show, but she does know what she wants, and Lorelai really doesn't. So that's kind of what she's going through, and we're seeing that in this episode. So it's also a Chilton one. There's a little bit of Chilton in it. There's a little bit of family. So we there tend to be town episodes, Chilton episodes, and family episodes, as you have mentioned several times. And this is all of them in this one.
Yeah, and this one is definitely a very open-ended episode. We kind of introduce a couple of storylines and don't really close out on any of them, except hopefully Chase. But we're kind of introducing the idea that Lorelai maybe wants to get back together with Max, though he doesn't actually show up in this episode. Yeah. And then we're introducing Rachel, and we're introducing the idea of Rory and Dean's breakup, and not really resolving any of these things.
And we also introduced the idea that Richard actually seemed to understand his daughter in this episode. Richard goes to look for her, finds her climbing out the window, escaping, and does not turn her into Emily. That's just that's a growth. I mean, that's a huge step forward for Richard. And it's probably because it comes out of his own experience with this guy. He understands why Lorelai wants to get away. And usually he can't. He does not understand why she doesn't want the life he wants. He's kind of got an inkling here. This young guy, this Chase guy, he's boring. I wonder if Richard is actually thinking for the first time, I wonder if everybody in our circle is boring. I would like to give Richard that kind of credit. So, interesting episode.
Yeah.
Okay, so that, dear listeners, is all for today.
I'm Tessa Dare. You can find me at my website, tessadare.com, where you can sign up for my email list, or you can follow me on Instagram at author.tess.adair, or on TikTok at author.tess.adair. And if you want to support us on Patreon, we are at patreon.com/whereyoulead.
And I'm Beth Von Barron. You can follow me on Instagram at STL_writer_Beth, or sign up for my weekly Substack email, Saturday Morning Musings, at stlwriterbeth.substack.com. I am getting ever closer to getting my novel finished with the editing. Tess has been doing a great job with that, and hopefully At some point in the future, it'll be ready to be published. So this is, we'll see. This has been Where You Lead, our fun and witty podcast about the Gilmore Girls from the perspective of a mother and daughter. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll tune in for our next episode in 2 weeks. See you then.